meant you didn't have to experience living. It would save us from having to experience the emotions, experience the turmoil, experience the frustration. But it doesn't work like that. And I think what is really, really important in this moment is that you not beat yourself up for the hope. I think it's really important that you resist saying to yourself, see, if I had just never hoped, then I would never be feeling anything. I wouldn't even be feeling this way. I would just be like, it would be just fine today. You know, instead of may you take care of yourself today over the next 4 years, because our history as Black women in America is filled with work that matters, even if we don't always see the fruit of it in the way that we hope for. Someone who easily comes to mind is Ida B. Wells. We love her work. We laud her work. But also the anti-lynching bill she fought for never passed. I'm going to guess that made her sad. I'm going to guess that made her mad. I'm going to guess she experienced disappointment and frustration. I'm going to guess that at some point she sat down and thought, what is all of this for? Why am I doing this? Why am I putting my life at risk? Why am I putting my family's life at risk? Why am I doing this to myself? And I don't know what her answer would have been, but my answer to you is that you did it for you. Sometimes there's this narrative in America that we will save democracy, that will save America from itself. But I hope the truth is that you do what you do because you are full and equal citizen, demanding full and equal citizenship, right? And that demand, that hope, is never a bad thing. Even when America pushes back, it will always, always still the right thing to do. It's still the right place to put your hope. The fact that America got it wrong doesn't make you wrong. You're always right to fight for the America that you deserve. So the question that remains is, what do we do with the fact that America is exactly who we thought it was? And I know that a lot of people right now are saying that the answer to that is to fight. We have to get up off the floor. We have to get ready. And I appreciate that resolve. I do. I really do. I appreciate that resolve. But again, to Black women, I want to say to you, I know you're tired. I know you're tired because you were fighting when the floodwaters hit Katrina, and you were fighting to elect the first Black president. You were fighting when the Confederate statues came down, and you were fighting when you marched through the streets of Ferguson. And you were fighting when Black folks were gunned down in Mother Emanuel, and this list could go on and on and on and on. I also know there are people around you who ain't been in the fight that long, and they can say fight because they haven't been inside the ropes as long as you have. I know you're tired. So you let the people who feel like getting off the mat and who want to fight do that. But for you who are tired, who have been fighting long before this election, long before George Floyd, long before 2020, long before 2016, long before Ferguson, long before Trayvon Martin, long before Katrina, I plead with you to honor your humanity today. Please, just honor your humanity today. So we are going to start with a breath. Everybody just take a breath right now. Just feel yourself with nothing but peace in this space, because this is a very peaceful space. And breathe out all of the things that you can't name, the things that you are afraid to name, the things that you are tired of naming. Breathe those out. Taking another deep breath. And let it out. And I'm going to welcome to the mic Ms. Peter Clark. You got to use the mic. You guys hear me? I mean, y'all here. So, yeah. Okay. So first things first. So Queen Zinga went by many different names entitled. She preferred to be called King Zinga, and I'm going to respect that. So for this presentation, I'm going to be calling her
King Nzinga, and then also be using the spelling of her name, Nzinga, as there's different spellings of her name. But for this, I'm going to use Nzinga. Next slide, please. Okay, so I do have to travel after my presentation, so I may go really fast here, but here's the agenda of everything that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to overview her life and legacy, King Nzinga's role in African history. We're going to conclude, and then I'm going to provide opportunities to keep learning. Next slide. So King Nzinga was born of royalty of the Ndogo Kingdom in 1582. Her dad, the king, made sure that she was well educated, knew military tactics, diplomacy, and governance. She was fluent in Portuguese. Yes. Her father did pass away, and it was said that he wanted her to take over afterwards, but her brother, Ngola Mbonde, became king instead. There was a lot of conspiracies of how King Nzinga became the queen, and because her brother died either by suicide or murder, folks considered her to have killed him. But either way, she was made queen after, and as Portuguese was continuing to expand. Next slide, please. Okay. So in 1622, before he passed, she represented her brother in negotiations with the Portuguese. I'm gonna mess that word up, sorry y'all. And famously outsmarted them. During one meeting, when she was not provided a seat, Nzinga had one of her servants kneel down so she could sit on their back, symbolizing that she was an equal to the Portuguese governor. And I quoted Shirley Chisholm, and it says, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." Mm-hmm. And Queen Nzinga brought a folding person. So. All right, next slide. Okay. Nzinga created alliances with local tribes, even the Dutch against the Portuguese. Thank you. Although she was able to bring communities together, it often wasn't enough due to limited resources and lack of people. I know we can all relate to that whenever we're doing things. Limited resources, lack of people. Next slide. Okay, so here's more information I thought was really interesting. So Nzinga was that girl. She ran her house didn't run her. She had both male and female concubines. She married multiple husbands. She dressed like a man, and she insisted on being called king. She did decide to live as a man to solidify her authority, and then she required her husband to dress up as a woman. So she was running. She also converted to Christianity for favor with the and took the name Anna de Sousa. So she, like I said, she had different names. For legacy, she did pass away December the 17th, 1663, and her sister Mbu took over. Nzinga's memory is preserved in the traditions of Black Brazilians and descendants worldwide. In particular, Nzinga is remembered among Afro-Brazilians who descended from Angola slaves. Each year celebrate her legend by electing the king of Congo and Queen Nzinga each year. They dedicated floats, sing praises, and also during Rio Carnival. In 2013, the Angola government commemorated the 350th anniversary of Nzinga's death by erecting a statue in her honor in Luanda. Next slide. So King Nzinga's legacy continues to inspire African and African diaspora communities worldwide. Her story of resilience, resistance, even fluidity serves as a reminder of Africa's long history of resistance and agency and sovereignty. Next slide. Lastly, I did want to highlight that King Nzinga did her best to protect her people from the Atlantic slave trade. I think oftentimes we talk about our ancestors being taken, but also there was resistance, and she did her best. And like I said, lack of resources and lack of manpower, you know. But the trading of enslaved people did end in Angola in 1836. Okay, next slide. And the next slide. Okay, so here's a couple of points in conclusion. Nzinga was born of royalty and was well educated. She broke gender norms by leading armies, and stands as a symbol of strength and empowerment for African peoples. Her cultural identity was deeply rooted in customs, spirituality, values of her people, which served as a powerful source of strength. She also led her people resisting the Portuguese colonization. Next slide. So here's some opportunities to keep learning. Stars apparently is developing a Queen Nzinga series with 50 cents. Cool. And then there is a docu-series on Netflix. I haven't watched it yet, but it's on Queen Nzinga. The National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC does have, I think it's like I didn't get to go in when I went because the line was really long. But there's a picture of her and like brief information about her there. And then there's several books about her included into African history and other women who were part of African history that did amazing things. Next slide. And then here's all my references. A couple of my favorite ones was enslaved.org, and then also, which one was it? Britannica. I did feel like that information was less questionable than the other ones because some of the history is a little shaky there, but, and that's it.
Actually, we can't wait for burning questions because she's got to go. So does anybody?
I have a question for you. I want to start. What did you get out of doing this? Because there's so much in your life.
I got that. I know as Black women, especially darker skinned women, we're often masculine. What's the word? And I feel like, yes, thank you. And like with her, Nzinga seemed like she embraced it and also didn't let it stop her. Like she literally let people call her king. So it didn't bother her. She did her stuff and she was educated. And no matter what, because I'm sure she was scared going to a room full of white people. I do that every day at work.
Wow.
She did it and she ran things. So it was encouraging to read, to do her history. Anybody else?
I have a quick question. So, as your friend, what lesson do you feel in that whole story that you felt like she could have done better? Like when you sat there, you were like, hey.
I did feel like she folded a little bit with converting to Christianity. She was not converting it because she wanted to. It was to be to get things, which I did, like we did. And she did eventually go back to African spirituality, but I didn't like that. And then there were some slaves that she did also sell. So, but I think there's no good or bad people. I think there's good or bad choices. So I think she's a complex person, just like all of us in this room are. But yeah.
Did an amazing job.
I'll let you do this part. Switch it over. We now have Ms. Sherry Thomas.
I really like that, but I think you already know this.
Yeah, I thought that hat says it all. So hello, everyone. I'm a little nervous. This is all of my comfort zone, but I was born Rosa Louise McCollum, February the 4th, 1913, in Tuskegee, Alabama, to James and Lenore McCollum. I had one younger brother, Sylvester, and we grew up in the South during a time of segregation. I experienced racism at a very early age. I attended a segregated elementary school until I was 11. And then my family moved us to Montgomery, Alabama. There I attended the Montgomery Industrial School for Girls, and I later enrolled in Alabama State College for Negroes to become a school teacher. But unfortunately, my grandmother became ill, and I had to drop out and provide for her care. The Alabama State College for Negroes is now Alabama State University. I continued my education at that industrial school for girls, and graduated, which was a rare achievement for African Americans during that time. Like I said, I later spent a few years at Alabama State Teachers College, but I had to drop out. During that period, I began working as a seamstress for a local department store, and I met my husband, Raymond Parks, in 1932. He was a barber and an active civil rights supporter, He encouraged me to join the NAACP, and together we faced many challenges in the struggle for civil rights. Our relationship provided a strong foundation for my work and commitment to justice. While I wasn't the first African American to refuse or give up a seat on a bus, Claudette Colvin, a 15-year-old, had done so before me. But my actions on December 1st, 1955, helped ignite the movement. That day, after a long day of work, I boarded a bus with two other African Americans. As you know, during that time, we had to load the bus from the back, we had to sit in the back of the bus, and it didn't matter whether there were seats on the bus that were empty. If a white person wanted that seat, we had to give up our seat. So that day, of course, they asked us to move, and the two other African Americans, they gave up their seats, but I refused. So the police were called, and he asked me why I refused to give up my seat. And I said, because I'm tired. But I don't think you realize it wasn't the physical tired, it was actually the mental tiredness of fighting for our justice, fighting for our freedom. So I spent the night in jail, and I thought, something has to be done about this. It's not right, it's not fair. So I reached out to fellow students, my community, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and the Baptist minister, Ralph Abernathy, for help. So together we put together the Montgomery bus boycott. Believe it or not, the boycott lasted 381 days. It ended in a landmark Supreme Court decision declaring segregation on public buses unconstitutional. Well, Raymond and I, we suffered severe repercussions for this, for being involved in the civil rights movement. We both lost our jobs, we struggled financially, and harassment was a constant reality for finding work. So eventually we moved to Detroit, Michigan, where I began working for our Congressman, John Convey, and my work was advocating for housing and racial equality. Even after Raymond's passing in 1977, I continued to pursue civil rights causes we have championed together. Sadly, he never saw me receive two of the highest honors a civilian can receive in the United States. The Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996 and the Congressional Gold Medal in 1999. Of course, I received several other awards and so forth, but he never got to see any of this. I passed away on October the 24th, 2005, and I was honored as the first woman and the second African American to lie in state at the United States Capitol. My legacy is celebrated in many ways. Rosa Parks Day is recognized in several states on either December 1st December 1st or February 4th. But most of all, I'm remembered as the mother of the civil rights movement. Thank you.
Any burning questions? Yes.
Did you have kids?
No, she didn't. I think that the movement was so strong that they didn't have time for kids. Or maybe they didn't want their kids to experience what's going on.
A lot of people in sports movement chose not to have children.
Any other questions? Burning questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Miss Daisy.
A little bit. I'm actually that high for that deal. I just want to throw that out. Oh, yeah. I did a PowerPoint, folks. It's an easy way to visually learn and get stuff done. Yeah. I'm gonna need as much as I can. I gotta get down. Alright, so my person was Miss Dorothy Heights. Now, I did take the opportunity to read her book and her autobiographies she wrote, and one thing that she asked was for privacy for family, so I'm going to respect that. So she did politics for a long time, and that's where I think that felt came from. Like, she did not want people to know about any of her family, her kids, and so forth, but I will talk a little bit about it. When doing this PowerPoint, or one of her quotes was, greatness is not measured of what a man or a woman can accomplish, but by the opposition he or she overcomes to reach their goal. And I think this was a testament to her life, because essentially through her narrative, I did drop conversations with Dorothy Heights in the chat for the Black Woman You Should Know. It's a beautiful conversation. I loved it so much when I first time wrote this that I stole it for a different project. I'm going to say conversations with this instead for honoring her. So Dorothy Heights, next slide please. All right, so quick introduction. She was born on March 24th, 1912 in Richmond, Virginia. She's an Aries. Just in case you didn't know what an Aries is, Aries are bold, energetic, full, vibrant, charismatic, fun-living, passionate, driven individuals with desires. Essentially, according to the population of the census at that time, it was about 24,000 people. The current population for Richmond is 229,000 just. The reason why I thought that was such a significant number for me is because, for example, if you know the city council districts, it's about 15,000 people in each district. So it's just two districts. Just think of going to District 1, District 2, and that's the same population she was born. Her family moved to Rankin, Pennsylvania. Essentially what they did was her father, James Height, went for construction work. One thing I thought was really cool at that present time, it was part of the Great Migration. So the Heights family moved essentially to the group of Black Southerners to the north, to the west for manufacturing jobs and dense industry jobs. One thing that she also does not talk much about that I think also prevailed her in her life was she was part of an integrational school, which was not common at that particular time. She attends New York University. Basically, that's why I think she went. Now, the cool thing I thought that she doesn't really focus about this. She was denied to go to Columbia, essentially. So Dorothy has an outstanding student, won a scholarship to Bernard's College. However, due to the racial quota, she was denied. So her and her sister essentially do the next day is drive from all the way from that portion to New York City. And they go to the door and they say, hey, by the way, we're going to go to school. So the dean of that particular school at that moment asked, where's your resume? She said, I don't have one. Where's your diploma? I don't have it. She says, but I do have this letter by a highly credentialed person who says that I'm worthy to be in this school. And at that particular moment, the dean looks at it and says, you know what, with that kind of resume, you get accepted into the New York University. And that was just her and her sister who literally just take a bus and say, you know what, we're going to take opportunity into our own hands. You got denied just because of something, and we're going to change it. This is the beginning of her work. She got her master's in psychology. And over time, that is her basis in most of her organization, is just to think on a philosophical way of the mindset of men, women, and people of color. Next slide, please. So she begins her activism in high school and college. She enters racial discrimination, sought to dismantle barriers. A little thing I'll talk into further depth, she begins her work at the National Council of Negro Women, which the founder was Mary McLeod, thank you. Ultimately, she becomes an organizer and president, and we'll dive into it, but essentially in high school, one of her college friends in her book said, or not, in high school says, if there was something wrong, Dorothy would fix it. And this just is the principle of her whole life for the rest of it. Moving forward. There's something here. So, as a civil rights movement leader, oh, there's a video. Did that video come?
Is it on 4?
It should be on 4.
That's probably why it didn't load.
It's not fun. But okay. But moving forward, as a civil rights movement leader, her role, Dorothy was a unique figure in the civil rights movement because her role both as an organizer and a strategist. She worked along with prominent leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King, Philip Randolph, and John Lewis. She was a strategic influence. Dorothy organized voter registration drives, worked with economic equality campaigns, advocating for issues for desegregation, fair wages, and equal opportunity of education. Some of the organizations she worked outside of the Negro Women of Council was YWCA. She actually used the YWCA to do education and voter registration and also help mobilize and disenfranchised individuals. A lot of the programs that you see in the YWCA actually was spearheaded from Dorothy, but she never got the credit for it until later into 1991. Moving to the next slide. Just taking a moment.
There she is.
This is Dorothy Heights. I love this. It's a phenomenal side-eye picture where, as some might know, Dr. King had a speech that day that was phenomenal for all of us, but it had been rumored that there were some things that he said off the cuff. And I just looked at this picture, and as a person who strategizes and does things, I wonder if she sat there and said, boy, you should not be saying this at this particular moment. Why are you saying this to this group of people? And then it was captured in that moment. In fact, her influence was so major. The video I wanted to show you, I'm going to describe it a little bit, was her it was the 50th anniversary of the Negro Women's of Council, and she went to, I believe at that time, president was, Lord, the actor. Who was that actor?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. So she went to Ronald Reagan and she was accepting their honors at that particular time. And the reason why I thought it was so moving is because she talks about Black women not being seen. And she talks about the disparity of what happens to us for not being seen in those moments. And she's saying after 50 years, she's shocked that that's still there. I wondered to myself when I sat there and she saw what happened recently, if she would have had chills. One big thing, as a political strategist, she was influential all the way from her local state all the way to DC. So she had been known to tell other individuals or help them in that scenario of what needs to be done. If you have the opportunity, I'll post it later on the Black Women Should Know group so that people can watch it. But it is a testimony where she basically says that one portion of it, she also sits there and she says, Black women are the beginning of all civil rights movement. We are the end and we are in the middle. And we are tired. And I thought it was amazing for her, especially under this time. But moving forward, so one thing is, Miss Dorothy was an advocate for women's rights. Intersectionality was one key thing. Before it was known as intersectionality within the feminist movement, she spoke about it. She addressed how racism and sexism is intersected, particularly for Black women who face unique challenges within the civil rights movement and society. I thought it was liberating essentially for her path because she usually was typically the only woman in the room and she would be classified. In fact, they would even, one thing, if you ever see a photo or you see the photos with her, she always stayed with a hat, a pressed dress, and stockings, and she always had her nails done, right? Just so that other individuals could understand that she is a woman in the room. She would be martyred by other men in civil rights. In her book, she doesn't describe who it is, but she says that several times she was classified as a man or being too boast in the room because she would come up with ideas. In fact, the conversation of March on Washington started in her kitchen. And as somebody who is a strategist, I know how many times I've just sat there and just said, hey, this is a great idea. And then later on, it turns into something else. And then I wondered to her credit, did she feel pain at the end of the day? Because they took it away from her and said, this is not yours. But I think she saw her legacy for women's rights was Dorothy led a foundation and future movements that recognized and addressed that intersectionality of race, gender, making a pivotal figures within civil rights. She worked also with Rosa Parks. She worked all the way with Ella Baker, who I did a presentation on earlier, and she also advocated on their rights and saying how, as if you read my other one, Ella was crucified several times for not having a husband or not having children. Dorothy came to her side several times and told people it was not your business to basically judge her as a woman. Next slide, please. Oh, this one, yes. Oh, can you go back one slide real quick? I really love this picture in the left corner. It was taken from Morris Dossman, the American Labor Council, Dorothy's Next, the National Committee Negro of Women's was her foundation. Alexander Allen was the Urban League Basel. Let's see here, sorry. Bayard Rustin.
Bayard.
Bayard. It's Bayard.
Bayard, that's right. Rustin.
Bayard Rustin, the director of the Philip Randolph Institution, walking together to meet Mayor Wagner in New York in June 4th. I love this photo because essentially she's having this conversation and you kind of can see everybody swinging towards her to see what her direction, her point of view, what does she think should be done. Moving forward, okay. Now, the leadership in the National Council of Negro Women. Dorothy served as the president for 40 years, transforming it to a powerhouse organization advocating for Black women and their issues in the U.S. and internationally. The program's initiatives understand her leadership, launching programs of education, workforce training, health. She also established the Bethany Heights Recognition Program, which celebrates Black women's achievement and contribution in their communities. She also, in her legacy, provided Black women the opportunity to run for politics, seek higher performing jobs within education and economic development, and strengthen the community. As if you had seen the video, one of the biggest things she always advocated was that Black women can lead in different variations of it. And one thing that she saw with the National Council of Negro Women was that unfortunately, we would be the leaders of the conversation, but we would never be part of the conversation to be elected in the conversation. So her biggest instrument that she would do behind the scenes was to see how she could find women to actually lead. Like, for example, her biggest accomplishment that she was always favorable about was Shirley Chisholm, and how much what she could do behind the scenes to ensure Shirley Chisholm could actually put her name as a president. Next one. Her international influence in humanitarian work. Dorothy expanded the Negro Council of National Council of Negro Women's mission, including in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. She believed the importance of women globally. She helped establish educational programs and school initiatives. She actually had a school in Brazil for the longest. Before she had a school here, she always used to say in her videos. She also, for Jimmy Carter, our President Jimmy Carter, was appointed as the representative of the U.S. as a UN commission as a statute for the Statue of Women, where she advocated for women's rights in international scales. Her last influence was abroad. Her partnership was worldwide, where she created solidarity between American women and other women across the world. Last one, next one, please. Legacy and honor. Dorothy was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of her highest civil honors that a U.S. American can receive. Her lifetime service within civil rights and social justice. She also received the Congressional Gold Medal in 2004. I love that one. This is actually where the photo is, which I think is hilarious. It's kind of a testament to the eyesight photo, where essentially I think is Hillary just saying how wonderful you did to get this particular position, and then Bush is just side-eyeing, like, why? Why are you recognizing at this moment? In fact, she believed in Hillary so much that some of her original seed money that I actually pulled up and looked at campaign pages, it took me a while. But if you do it, you might as well go all the way deep in. And some of her original seed money came from her foundations. So I think she would have loved that Kamala was running, but at the same time, would have been as big as disappointed as the rest of us. Moving forward. So just a couple famous quotes that kind of stuck with me is, if the times aren't right, you have to write the times. This speaks to her proactive approach of her belief of power position perspective. Without community servants, we would not have strong quality of life, which I think are testimony to her whole career, because if it wasn't right, she always made it right. And her advocacy work was always in quality of life and the quality of life of a woman. There was one speech, if you look on YouTube, that's really phenomenal, where she, I was just thinking it from because of the earlier conversation I was having today. She believed if a woman was the center of all governments, was the center of all religion, was the center of all bases of life, then essentially what would happen is we would have a better quality of life overall. Because women would naturally gauge us to, hey, if by the way, toxic masculinity is not needed. But what ended up happening was she saw this narrative, you could see in her book, where she saw, due to us presenting in a patriarchal system, unfortunately the default was always going to land in something toxic, because unfortunately due to certain individuals, they felt like, how can I say, a quote from her book was this. She also read her own theses too. But a quote from her book was essentially is, a man will always choose the wrong thing, not because he wants to, but because he was taught. So I think that was kind of her principal idea of anything she kind of had and went through. Dorothy continues to inspire and engage in activism in different formats. In fact, if you've heard of a campaign, I think it's When Black Women Win, they actually took a lot of their ideas from her strategies and her foundations that she did. So if you didn't know, outside, she basically used, short storm, the National Council of Negro Women as a political foundation to create strategies to implement and infiltrate certain scenarios and organize. So by doing so, she got the name of the godmother of the civil rights movement, because essentially a lot of people had to go to her to get things cleared or get things done in certain attributes. Final thoughts. Well, my personal one, I think she was a boss ass woman. So, but outside that, Dorothy's life was exemplary resistance, advocacy work. She broke down many barriers. Dorothy teaches, final thoughts is Dorothy Heights' life teaches us the perceivance we can overcome challenges and make meaningful progress towards more justice of society. That's it.
Now, we can open it up. Oh, lots of burning questions. There's a hand back there. Oh, go ahead.
Who was the letter from that got her into the school?
It was
Diane to know.
dying to know. If you go onto Black Women's group, there's a conversation I dropped in there. It's actually in there. His name was I think it was Nick something immediately. I think I've heard of it. Well, if you're not, every short plug, please join Black Women's group. Black Women should know.
Black women should know about.
Yes. She got that letter. It was literally her and her sister when she got the denial, and she was like, okay, you can't make it. She made this idea that I'm going to get this letter to say I can get accepted into the school. But then her sister sat there and was like, oh, we'll have to mail it. It's going to take this night, and school starts on this. So she's decided on her own accord, like, hey, we can just go out there. So like literally they took their little money that they had, got on the train, rode all night, and I think they got in trouble by the time they got home because their parents didn't know like where they were at. They were MIA for 24 hours. But she was like, I'm getting into school and we're gonna figure it out.
I was able to find that video.
Oh yes, please. Yes.
Oh, seat.
Mr. President, Mrs. Reagan, on behalf of the National Council of Negro Women, I want to thank you sincerely. This is indeed an historic occasion. It marks the first time the National Council of Negro Women has been honored by the President of the United States for its years of public service and advocacy. It comes on the eve of the biennial launching of the 50th anniversary of the founding of the National Council of Negro Women. Our founder, Mary McLeod Bethune, was a courageous woman born of slave parents, and the only American Black woman ever to have founded a 4-year accredited college, Bethune-Cookman College. She loved her people and worked to make America a place to love for all its people, of every race, creed, color, class, or sex. In a day when it seemed unlikely, Mrs. Bethune was appointed by President Roosevelt as Director of Minority Affairs for the National Youth Administration. In 1935, in the height of her public life, she could not rest when she saw the unharnessed woman power, and so she organized this coalition, which today comprises 27 national organizations with more than 200 community-based sections, with an outreach to 4 million women in every strata of society: urban, rural, professional, non-professional, employed, unemployed, wealthy, poor, business, and industry. The women assembled here are from every part of the country. We are a widely diverse group. We represent something of what it has been possible for Black women to achieve, often against great odds. But our achievement is not enough for us, nor is it enough for our country. We work to leave no one behind. We come with expectations of the good inherent in such an occasion with you. Mrs. Reagan, I was here in this room when you inaugurated the program to cope with the devastating impact of drugs on our youth. We thank you. We share, too, your abiding concern for strengthening family life and the undergirding of our children, utilizing that reservoir of talent and hope in foster grandparents. Your influence can inspire unrelenting effort to alleviate crippling conditions in the lives of children and of our youth. Mr. President, community-based organizations like the National Council of Negro Women are important partners in your private sector initiatives. Volunteerism is the very base of our existence. We know firsthand the hard-core problems in communities because we are there to serve. Commitment, unity, and self-reliance are the underlying themes for whatever we do. The National Council of Negro Women appreciates this opportunity and hopes that there may be continuing dialogue to share our aspirations and needs. There is no way to strengthen the Black family without advancing women. Black women are a greatly underutilized national resource with a potential to enhance our nation's growth. Mr. President, in the words of our commitment, written many years ago, is expressed the determination with which we come today, and I quote, "It is our pledge to make a lasting contribution to all that is finest and best in America, to cherish her heritage of freedom and progress by working for the integration of all her people, regardless of race, creed, or national origin, into her spiritual, social, cultural, economic, and civic life, and thus aid her to achieve the glorious destiny of a true and unfettered democracy."
I think it's really cool because 3 things happened in that video that was really, from my point of view, was amazing. First thing, like she mentions, as we all know what came to be later, Reagan's wife's initiative against the drugs, right? Or drugs initiative, which essentially
Say no to drugs.
Say no to drugs, which is essentially was there later on. We come to find out to come and criminalize us and ban us down and put us in jail, which she had spoke about several times, and that's why she mentions I was in the room. I think she even went on record, and there was testimony in the U.S. Senate where she said that she was against it. First thing, which she never let down on Ronald Reagan's wife about. Another thing that she says there says Black women are under a resource that is not used because she, again, that point of view that she had continuously, Black women are essentially the foundation was her principle. She was so vocal on that in fact it intimidated certain people, and some people thought she was crazy because she said Black women are the foundation of America. On top of that, she said that with bold, especially from, I guess, not to get into too much of what I personally do, but from where I know from and where I work at every day in the political realm, she is literally a symbol of hope for me, because I know there was a woman who went all the way and she kept her integrity of her culture, her people, and who she was, and was still able to tell people like, hey, you should respect me. And I think she was completely humble. That was the last thing, is how humble she was as a human being. That was the astonishing thing, because one thing, especially in the political realm, sometimes people become very arrogant very quickly. Power can do that to you, right? But she, for somehow, some way, or something in her, always stayed innately humble. Because even when you see her making that testimony to the founder, and she always made testimony to the founder, that was her brain that intellectually created the property to make 40 million strong Black women to organize. It was her mind that was able to make the communities grow. And she never, ever, even when people begged her sometimes to sit there and say, take the claim for this. But she felt like if she took the claim for the work, then essentially what would happen was nobody would see themselves in the work. So she stopped doing that years ago, and she would say, I can take credit in other ways. But this is a coalition, and she kept that way. And I think, again, from my position, seeing somebody that humble who's doing the same work is just honoring on so many levels, because you're always told otherwise. But that's Ms. Tam.
Okay, needed to mention that she was a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and before she was, she was president of National Council on Negro Women from 57 to 97. She was the 10th president, national president, from 1947 to 1956. So she was our longest serving national president. And I got to meet her at my first convention in 1970. She did not miss a national convention. And I met her at her first one in 1977. And that's when I was trying to get everybody's autograph, but she didn't do pictures. Anyway, long story short, she was signing the program, and I said, hey, you signed my mama's certificate. She didn't. She wasn't. Because everybody know how old she was. Because my mom went over in 1954. Yeah, 1954. So, yeah. But she came to every convention, and then when I bought the book from her, she was a lot nicer when she signed the book for my mother. So I got that.
She said, you gotta pay me. Yeah. She was about that today.
My son keeps saying, you gotta get your father. I'm like, but yeah, so, and social action that the sorority pursues vigorously came from sorority, a lot of stuff.
I think the more I dug into it, actually, she created a lot of programs, a lot of initiative, a lot of political strategy that is still used till today. And different, even SNCC. She had a problem with SNCC for a little bit because she felt like they stole her ideas and they took her away. And there was right before. Where's that? Did you have your hand up?
Oh, I was just wondering if there's a National Council of Negro Women branch here.
No,
it wasn't Los Angeles.
Not here. There's not one in the Midwest yet. Yeah, I like
there you
that.
Go. Yeah, that sounds good.
You answered both of my questions. Was if there was one and whether or not there was one nearby, because I didn't think there was one here.
There's not one here. It's kind of what my personal perspective. It's kind of like the
NAACP.
Well, I was recently corrected to stop saying AA. You have to say NAACP.
My mother, and it's stuck in my head.
Some of us still saying NAACP just because we
I was on that format too.
We're old, okay. But I was sorry.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I'll remember that if I ever join again.
But actually, on that testament of, I think it's the same thing. Unfortunately, after Dorothy Heights, just like the NAACP, a lot of these organizations are dying in criminalization just because there was no plan for the generation to come. Dorothy Heights did it, Rosa Parks did it, I think Ella Parker did it. A lot of the women we've talked about who were part of the civil rights movement made a plan for the next generation because they knew it was but something happened at some time, and either people became, in my personal perceivance, greedy, or there was a dismantle, a purposeful, intentional dismantle of the organization to ensure that that organization doesn't continue. Just like some president, you can look up which president said it, but as they said, excuse my language, the nigga is a problem, and the black leader, we need to kill the black messiah, and the black messiah essentially can come as a woman or a man. And they did things intentionally to ensure these organizations are encrypted. Now, unfortunately, that could also be encrypted by our own people, because essentially, in my personal belief, if money, they can turn into greed, and if you start, lack of a better term, lobbying certain scenarios to ensure that that infrastructure or that system is now well fed, like the pastor's fed, everybody else is fed, maybe that can doctorate, the system. There's one case and then that's it.
Wait, I have one question. What would you like to see as an organizer, as a strategist in Topeka? And dream big, basically.
No, I will. Miss Carrie, that's one of those times I would ask for live.
Yeah. Tara, do you want to wrap up and then answer? Would that work?
Yes. So do we have any announcements of any upcoming events that anyone would like to share? Anything important that our audience needs to know?
Sure. So I'm an insurance agent. I'm not here to sell you. It is the time of year when if you do not have insurance, you want to check out the marketplace. And if you're on Medicare, you want to check out the new plans for 2025. I can help you do that, but any agent can help you do that as well. But it's important because things are changing, especially with the prescription drug program. So if you are working and your job does not provide you insurance, you can get health insurance. And at this point of year, for the marketplace plans, you can get a discount on those premiums. So talk to somebody, go to
Marketplace.gov.
healthcare.gov. If you scroll down, you can click on Find Local Help wherever you are, wherever you're watching. Find Local Help, an agent will call you or email you. Expect a call within 15 minutes. So don't miss out. If you don't get your insurance, Medicare by December 7, Marketplace, Obamacare, talk about not putting your name on stuff because people ain't going, right? By December 15, if you miss those deadlines largely, if you don't have insurance, you won't have it next year. If you don't check out the new plans for 2025, whatever you have now will continue no matter what the changes are. So don't get stuck calling me in June talking about, I can't even see my doctor.
And how can people reach you if they want to talk to you?
Sure. My company is healthmarkets.com. You can call me if you like, 785-430-9020. You can find me on Facebook at Crazy Insurance Lady. And or you can just Google me, do a Google search. Gay Glenn Insurance, you'll find me. I'm all over the place.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's important.
Oh, and I was just going to piggyback on that because of where I work. And I'm not an insurance agent, and I'm not trying to take anything away from you.
There's plenty of people.
There's enough, yes, there's enough, but the buses in Topeka will be wrapped, giving you information about how to navigate the marketplace. And the buses will be wrapped, and there's also going to be a sign on the ceiling of the buses letting you know about the marketplace and the insurance exchange that's being opened.
Healthcare.gov. Go there and you can sign up yourself if you don't want anyone to help you. If you want some help, there's help available. Doesn't have to be me. You would want it to be me. Doesn't have to.
Thank you. That is important. Okay, so we are going to wrap up and post a new list, an updated list of who will be coming this month.